like a vase without flowers. I had too much to drink again the night before. I knew because my wife wasn't speaking to me. I don't remember what I did or said, but it must have been bad because she held it together until dinner, and then she wept into her reheated lasagna. I moved to comfort her, but she recoiled against my touch and put up her hands like she wanted to defend herself. I backed away, abandoned my leftovers, and went to the study. I tried to draw. My editor had hounded me about pages for the comic all week, so I figured I could sketch out some ideas. It was a bizarro horror thing, sort of Lovecraftian with a lot of tits and violence, so that's what I sketched. I sketched nude women holding talismans and mushy, toothy, tentacled masses rising above them. I sketched men in hoods holding candles and books textured to look like they were made from hair and teeth. Drawing relieved my aching heart, like lancing a blister to let out the pressure. It felt so good, and I'd felt so bad, so I decided to ride the wave with a drink. I opened the drawer with my crusty old flask. I always did my best work when I was buzzed. There's an elegant balance to strike between the buzz of inspirational power lines and getting sloppy. I was pretty good at engineering the balance, but after the fight with Sarah, I was honestly ready for bourbon oblivion. For a moment, as I twisted off the cap, the rusting metal's tinny squeak fooled me as a snicker. I flung my head back with a little mouth pressed against my lips, and for a second I thought a sigh snuck out amongst the bourbon gurgles cascading into my throat. I dismissed it as nerves and the sound of the AC kicking on, but then, when I was about to close the flask, I heard, "You'll never learn, will you?" The tiny voice emerged. I swear it emerged from the flask. You know, whenever they talk about UFOs and documentaries and stuff, they always check if the folks were drinking first, and I'd never understood why. I've never hallucinated because of liquor. But after the tiny voice, I almost got it. I almost understood. Flabbergasted, I gaped at the open flask, just about to announce I'd never drink again, when the voice returned. "You won't keep that promise. You're not strong enough." I pounded down the bourbon in the flask and then threw the old thing out. That was enough for me. In a short while, the liquor hit. Too drunk to work, I stewed in resentment and inky, nebulous self-loathing. I hated everyone and everything so much that my emotions were too heavy to lift. As a stone, they weighed down my gut, soaking in a brine of old granddad's bourbon. I drew sad, angry people in charcoal gradients. I drew grotesque, almost pathetic monsters with sagging skin and toothless mouths. I sketched until I couldn't keep my eyes open. And when I woke up to the roar of a splitting headache the next morning, I was on the study floor. I figured drinking hard liquor at home was what was messing me up, so I started drinking beer at bars. I'd look at the tap list, Google the ABV, and order the strongest one. I became a fixture at Mickey's Tap House. I'd drink my beer at the same booth in a secluded spot near the back window, sketching out new ideas. A crow started paying attention to me. I mean, at least I think it was the same crow. I remembered the UW crow experiment with the masks and how the crows would follow and harass the tormentors. I thought about a crow I threw a rock at when I got drunk after my college girlfriend left me, and I wondered if this crow had come for vengeance. The shiny black bird tapped on the glass with its beak and ruffled its feathers. I checked if anyone else noticed, but no one turned. It was a bustling midday weekend crowd, lots of ambient distraction, which was really unusual for Mickey's. I kept my eyes on the crow as I drained the glass of ale, shaking it for the last drop. The crow opened its beak, and from the beer-soaked interior of the glass came a voice. "You are so pathetic." I dropped the glass. It bounced off the table and shattered on the floor. My hand shook, and when I looked out the window, the crow was gone. Maybe I'm crazy, but I swear the crow stalked me. I mean, I'm not a bird expert, but crows never showed up in my daily life before. Now, when I went to the supermarket, I'd look up and a crow would dart across the blue as if it had been spotted and spooked. At my desk, sketching new panels, I'd hear a tap, 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 and sure enough, the crow eyed me sidelong from the other side of the glass. It always came when the agitation, a blunt splinter, dug into my brain, pushing and pressing whenever I was tired or stressed. It always came when I wanted a drink. One night, I had an ugly fight with my wife before I even had a drop to drink. It was a stupid miscommunication. We were so done with this song and dance that when we heard the opening bars, we already remembered the steps and tried to push through the routine as quickly as possible. So I left the house. I slammed the door on my way out, and the explosion of the King Ranch casserole shattered against the tile on the other side of the door, followed by a wail. I went to the bar with ugly black tar lining my guts and filthy lead chains burdening my heart. Larry, the bartender, knew me by now and already understood my MO. He poured me an ale as soon as I walked in, leaning against the bar like he wanted to tell me something. While he got my tab started, he gestured with his head. Someone was sitting in my spot. In my booth. It was mine. That's where my bird stalker would come visit me, where I would talk to him through the window, show him sketches, confess sins, regrets, and burdens. My crow friend was the only one who listened, and I needed him to listen tonight. I chugged the ale, told Larry to pour me another, and marched over to the booth. "Look, pal," I said, "this is my spot, and you need to move." The man's calm, thoughtful face broke into a narrow smile. Gold and silver teeth peeked between his lips. His lean, long face cocked from one side to the other as if he were inspecting me, and he gestured to the seat across from himself. "Of course. I've been waiting." Larry called out that my beer was ready. I put a finger in the slick intruder's face and snarled, "I want you gone when I'm back." I meant it. I was primed for violence, and Naberius was giving me a reason for it. I got my beer and stormed back, gulping it down. He stood, smoothing his shiny black suit and then extending a hand. "My name is Naberius. I'm a friend." "I already know your goddamned name," I said. "Now are you gonna get out of my booth? I'm expecting someone." A sly smile spread across his thin mouth, wrinkling the skin around his beakish nose. He cocked his head again, like he was inspecting me with one eye.
before?
I told him I'd never seen him in my life. I didn't want to stop and consider how I knew his name before he told me. I didn't want to stop and think about what he wanted or why he seemed to want to talk to me. All I wanted to do was drink my beer, sketch, and talk to your crow friend. A voice whispered from the beer glass. Naberius's mouth gaped until the voice stopped, and then he slowly closed it. My feet went cold. My eyes went wide, and the hair along my back and arms stood up on end. Naberius opened his mouth, and this time the voice came from him. It's nice to finally talk back. What do you want? I asked, uncertain if I should be angry, reverent, friendly, or fearful. Naberius gestured to the seat across from himself again. Please, sit. I want to help you. He waited until I took my place before he sat and resumed. You've told me a lot, Martin. You carry so much grief. You carry so much darkness. I want to help lighten the load. Larry took my empty glass and gave me a new beer, something dark with an inch-thick head. Everything okay? He asked. I told him everything was fine. He hovered, sizing Naberius up before, in turn, assessing me. He nodded, said all right, and returned to the bar. It's sweet that the bartender and his best customer are so close. Yeah, Larry's a good guy. Perhaps he's looking out for his interests. I sucked on my tongue and took a draught of the dark beer Larry had brought. You said you wanted to help me. Help me with what? Naberius pointed at the beer. With your problem. For starters. What are you, from AA? Forget about it. I'm a lost cause. What if you weren't? Oh, no, you're from a church. Look, buddy, I'm not interested. No. Nothing like that. Just let me buy your drinks and talk to me, and tomorrow, everything will be better. So, whatever, I did. There wasn't a reason not to let him pay for my drinks. I talked, and it did feel like my crow friend. I told him that there were two parts of me. There was the part doing bad that was mean to my wife and drank too much. And there was the part watching the other half ruin everything. By the end of the stout, I told Naberius I'd kill to have that dark part of me taken away. I looked over at Larry, but he was working with another customer and I'd have to wait for my refill. Naberius asked what I would do if I didn't have to kill anyone. He asked me if I'd make a simple trade. You see, I am a regret salesman. My job is to buy past regrets. I can buy the regretful parts of you. I can buy your regretful history if you want. I'll take all of it if you are willing. I scoffed. What a wackadoo. I rolled my eyes, told him we can start with the part I talked about and we can work our way up. Naberius cocked his head at a sharp angle again and grinned. His dark, beady eyes glistened hawkishly, and he flicked his fingernails against the sticky table. He said my beer tonight was on him. I smiled politely, taking out my sketchbook after he left for the bar with my empty glass. I was seized with the urge to draw him. I'd come tonight in part to escape, but with the veneer of hope I'd get some work done too. I had many looming deadlines weighing on me like burdensome stones, and I couldn't think straight about any of my projects. But something told me that I'd feel better if I dumped Naberius out of my head and onto the page. I got out my charcoal and thought it was the perfect medium to capture him. I could muster up my Regret Salesman in shadows. When he returned, I'd finished his head and was working on the details of his suit. I decided to give him the head of a crow. He put down the beer above the sketchbook and leaned over to look more closely at it. Hands in his pockets, he kept his bent elbows up and back so his suit spread open. It reminded me of wings. The resemblance is uncanny. Thanks. With a satisfied sigh, Naberius extended a hand. It was a pleasure, Martin. I'm sure our paths will cross again. Regret always comes back. Good luck. When I raised a hand to wave goodbye, I knocked the beer over. It spilled across the sketch's bird head. The beer washed away the charcoal, and I cursed, trying to salvage it, but everything I did just made it worse. When I looked up, Naberius was gone. I decided I didn't want another beer. Things started going smoothly after my bizarre encounter with Naberius. There was this clear-eyed ease to the world. It was easy to be sweet and kind to my wife. It was simple to sit down and draw for the comics. It was a breeze to pick up the chores I'd been neglecting. Sarah was the first to remark on my change. I think it occurred to her only peripherally at first. Maybe she just chose not to acknowledge it for fear attention might make the quantum waveform, which was me, to collapse and decide who I actually was. Maybe she thought I'd done something horrific and wanted to figure it out before she confronted me. I don't know what was crossing her mind, but I knew something was different when she asked if I'd gone back to sneaking liquor. She added it was none of her business, and she was just confused, curious, really, because the whiskey was easier to hide than the beer, and she really just wanted to know when I was drinking, because she didn't want me to hide it. That's when I realized I hadn't had a drink in over a week. I didn't say anything right away, but it must have been scrawled across my face. She put both hands to her mouth as she gasped, took a few steps back, and dropped onto the couch, crying. When I moved to hug her, this time, she reached for me. We clutched each other, weeping in each other's arms, kissing each other's tears. She said it was a miracle, repeating that word like a mantra, like she was willing it to be true, like if she didn't express enough gratitude or wonder, then God or whoever would take the gift away from her. We tried to have sex, but I couldn't get it up. I was flabbergasted. It must be age. I don't know, but I'd never in my life, even drowned in whiskey, had problems with getting a little man to stand up. There was a hollowness, though. Even before the performance issue, I was empty. In retrospect, the whole week had been like someone took a spoon to the inside of my chest, scraping it out like a jack-o'-lantern. Sarah curled up into my chest and stroked my cheek. She said it was okay. She was sure a lot was going on, and she hoped I'd let her in to help. But she was just happy to have me back. have me back. That phrase bothered me because I didn't feel like I was back. Something was missing, and it wasn't the alcohol. Sleep that night did not nourish me. I traveled a blank but unsettled dreamscape, not in darkness, not in light, just gray. I woke the next day with a crick in my back and an email from my editor. He'd asked if I was experimenting with a new style because he hadn't expected anything out of the ordinary. He'd expected Martin, and these sketches were just so corporate. They were flat. No juice was how he put it. He said one of the reasons why they liked me so much was because of the danger in my art. He said these new sketches may as well have been drawn by his grandma. Try again. Don't experiment. That's what he told me. Pages needed to be done fast. They didn't have time for this BS. My hands shook, and I struggled to swallow thick saliva. I didn't understand the sense of instability or of fear. I didn't understand what my editor meant. But when I opened my computer, it was clear. The drawings were so clean. Smooth, toothless, impotent. I thought about the night before. I thought further back to the casserole dish Sarah threw. I thought about what my editor had said may as well have been drawn by my grandma. We liked you because you were dangerous. I thought about Naberius, a man whose face I could barely recall, only that it was bird-like, and wondered what exactly the Regret Salesman had purchased from me. I took Sarah to dinner. I was remorseful about how I treated her, and I wanted to do something special. I needed to take my mind off the whole thing with the editor anyway, so a nice date with my wife seemed like the perfect choice. I also hoped to make up for my poor performance the other night. It bothered me. It was a weakness I didn't understand. I was a lot of terrible things. But weak was not one. Sarah looked amazing. Like, whoa. She was hot. She wore this slinky, glittery dress I'd never seen before. Made me wonder if she wanted to do over too. It had been a while. Work had taken precedence more for me than it had for her, and when the drinking shifted to bars, I was physically present less, so fewer opportunities rose. I tried dressing my best, but I couldn't compare. At dinner, things went well for a while, but then she seemed distracted. I asked her if everything was okay, and she jerked her head toward the bar behind me. She said a man looked just like me. A man in a shiny black suit. I choked on my water. It couldn't be him. Impossible. I tried to conjure the image of his face, but it only appeared to me like smeared lines of charcoal. But the suit concerned me. I thought of a few ways I could sneak a peek at the man in the shiny suit at the bar without being obvious, but I never had the opportunity. No sooner had I decided on a method than the front doors slammed open and a big, round, red-faced man came roaring in. I recognized him. I didn't actually know him, but I knew the flushed complexion and the tangled, complicated tapestry of barely coherent complaints spilling out of his mouth. I recognized the disheveled hair and the red streak of violence and the guttural tear of his voice. This man could have been me before Naberius. This man had a gun. He fired 2 shots into the ceiling and screamed something about fairness, about working his fingers to the bone, about giving up everything for this shithole restaurant. I assembled enough pieces of his rant to infer that he'd been fired, and given his state, I could imagine why. Sarah reached across the table for my hand and I took it. Our eyes met, both fearful and uncertain, and I tried to inject as much courage as I could into my gaze, but she seemed to look past me. She gasped, breaking the grip with my hand to cover her mouth while pointing with the other. I whirled around in time to witness the man in the shiny black suit approach the red-faced man with the gun. When I caught a glimpse, the resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't simply a resemblance. The man in the shiny suit was me. I had no doubt it was Naberius. Redface had his back to them, waving his gun at random patrons, screaming slurred slights at them, beseeching them to understand his plight when it was too far removed for them to comprehend, while corralled, terrified in a restaurant they had expected to spend a lovely evening in. By the time Redface had noticed the man in the shiny black suit, it was too late. He grabbed a wine bottle from a nearby table and decimated it across Redface's skull. Wine and broken glass spilled through the air, and Redface screamed in both terror and agony. The man in the shiny black suit grabbed 2 steak knives from the other table, and when Redface stumbled backwards, he launched a fist into his nose, then pinned his hands into the wood of a table with the knives like a budget crucifixion. Across from me, Sarah screamed and then swallowed oddly. When the man in the shiny black suit straightened up, he smiled and seemed to lock eyes with her across the room. He made a beeline for her. Sarah looked left and right, looking for the person she assumed he must actually be heading for, but all eyes were on them. Redface squirmed and wept, pleading for help. The area around him was all but abandoned. The man in the shiny black suit cocked his head to the side and extended a hand to my wife. "I'm Naberius. Have we met before?" Sarah looked at me, then back to Naberius, her mouth flapping speechlessly. What could I do? I couldn't tell her. What would I say? I sold the ugly, vicious parts of me to a man who's really a crow who says he buys regrets? That's the man who's talking to you now, but he looks exactly like me? Naberius pulled up a chair from an abandoned table nearby and sat between Sarah and I, leaning in toward her. It was as if I didn't exist. He smiled, focusing in on her, and I wondered if I was ever that smooth. I wondered if I was ever that charming. Naberius made it look so good. The police came and questioned us, naturally. One of them did a double take when he approached Naberius and I, literally rubbing his eyes before asking us questions. He assumed we were brothers, but Naberius clucked and shook his head. "Not brothers, just a coincidence." I got goosebumps. Nothing was coincidental about it. Naberius charmed the police, too. He had the grim-faced pair laughing and friendly in a matter of minutes. They said his reaction was a bit extreme, but they understood. One said he might lose his mind, too, if he had to defend his wife. I grit my teeth and my fingernails bit into my palm. Naberius threw his head back and laughed. He explained he and Sarah weren't together, and he locked a wicked, pleased gaze onto me. Sarah's face flushed, and she shifted, cleared her throat, and did that weird swallow again. The cops exchanged uncertain glances with each other, passing over me with a slight gaze, but not too long. It was like I was a hot kettle they could only barely touch before burning themselves. They cleared their throats, wished us all good night, and left. Naberius poured a glass of wine from the bottle the restaurant staff had given him as a thank you. It was when he poured a glass for Sarah that I saw it. His reflection in the bottle wasn't like mine. It was like a dog's, but it had the long, snaking tongue of a lizard and curling ram's horns. I choked. I had to be mistaken. I mean, it was a reflection in a wine bottle, right? It was hard to see. But that's what I saw. Sarah thanked him for the wine, but said we should get going. Naberius insisted we stay out. He'd take us to a place with the best sidecars in the city. His treat. His eyes glinted with a wicked gleam when he shifted his gaze to me. I hear people like their Shirley Temples too, but I don't know personally. Sarah's gaze hovered over him before landing on me. We should go. Lots to do tomorrow. Disappointed, Naberius reached into his jacket and withdrew a pair of business cards, handing one to each of us. Naberius Croder, it read. Illustrator. Sarah couldn't believe he was an artist too. She practically squealed. Naberius's eyes lingered a little lower on her and a little longer than they ought to. He said he'd love to find out what else he and I shared. Sarah gulped again. I stood up and said we should leave. At home, we tried to have sex again, but the hollowed-out jack-o'-lantern feeling persisted. Sarah wanted to lay on my chest, so I held her and stroked her head while she ran her fingers through my chest hair. She asked me if I ever wondered how much of my personality was really the alcohol. I didn't have an answer. I was taken aback by the question, which would have enraged me before, but I was empty. I had nothing to pull out of myself to respond, which only deepened my concern. I told her I didn't know. I held her close as she relaxed into the slow, quiet rhythm of her soft snores while I lay awake in the darkness, blocked from trying to wonder. I thought about Naberius, and the hollowness in my gut seemed to catch fire. It was like desperation and pining all in one. An amalgamation of desire and hopelessness. I don't think I fell asleep, but I don't remember staying awake. I only remember the complete darkness of the bedroom and discomfort, almost like acid reflux. I was glad I'd never have to see Naberius again. I was glad I could take control of my life again. The next morning, I lost a tooth. It fell out as I was brushing my teeth. I almost swallowed it. I couldn't believe it. I'd heard of alcoholics losing their teeth before, but I didn't think I'd been that far gone. And why would it happen now, when I'd already quit drinking? It'd been almost 2 weeks. When I took a shower, hair circled the drain around my feet. I didn't panic. I would have completely freaked out weeks ago, but I observed the hair with a distant fascination as I rinsed out the shampoo. I decided I should go to the doctor and managed to squeeze a telehealth visit in. The doctor was a little taken aback at my appearance. I looked pretty sallow in the video, I guess, and my skin hung off the bones of my face. The doctor asked a litany of questions that didn't seem to go anywhere. Was I eating well? Was I getting enough vitamin C? As if I could actually know. I told him I didn't think I had scurvy, if that's what he was asking. He suggested I see someone in person and sent for labs. I never went for them. I didn't have time. I had to finish the pages for my editor. I plowed through them almost dreamlike. It wasn't exactly a flow state like you get when you're highly focused. It was like when you clock out while driving, coming back to awareness when you reach your destination. As I uploaded the illustrations, I sighed. They were missing something. They stretched across the page, bloated. They were as I was. Empty. Hollow. Dead inside. I wasn't surprised by my editor's feedback. He was in shock, honestly. Had no clue what I was doing. He asked if I thought wasting his time was hilarious. If I thought it was funny, he growled, I should rethink some things. He said to forget about it. They had a new guy with a similar style and they just give the project to him. He told me to forward everything to the new guy and let him handle it. I was off the project and under review for the next one. The email he gave me for the new illustrator was naberius.croder@gmail.com. If I'd had more energy, if I'd had the spark he'd taken, I would have thrown my laptop across the room. I tongued the still raw space my tooth had abandoned. I clenched my jaw, squeezing it together in pulses, and discovered another loose tooth. I ran my hands through my hair and loose strands drifted down as if I were a shedding dog. I didn't understand what was happening. What had I done at the bar? Was Naberius now an alcoholic? Is that why he was living my life? I was a mess on the drink. How could he be doing so well? I thought about how he and Sarah had talked at the bar and my stomach turned. Was she next? Was she on his list of things to take? I could feel how he siphoned off of me. First, he'd taken my vice. Then he took my edge. And now he was taking my life. I went into the pantry and dug into the back. Some had to be left, I thought, just a drop left, a drink of whiskey just to make me whole again. A half-empty half-pint of cooking sherry leaned against the back wall of the bottom shelf. I don't even know what we had cooking sherry for, and I don't know how it lasted as long as it did in this house, but sitting on the floor of the pantry, back against the shelves, I tore off the cap and drank deep. My eyes watered as I chugged the burning liquid, and I don't even remember how it tasted. I just wanted it to take me away. I wanted it to remove me from the board so I didn't have to play anymore. I finished the bottle and tossed it away. It clattered across the kitchen tile with a sound like a child's toy drum. Waiting for the buzz and the tears, I stared at the backs of my hands. I studied the wrinkles that hadn't striated the skin a few days ago and the new liver spot on my knuckles. I asked whoever was listening if I'd done the right thing, and I wasn't sure if I was asking about Naberius or the drink. I knew they were both wrong anyway. I was numb, blank, hollow, like a vase without flowers. Sarah didn't come home that night. Things only got worse. Every day I woke up more desperate, discovering a new stage of decay. Sarah was concerned at first, but her pity plummeted into disgust when the skin started separating from muscle and sagging bundles. It only took a few days. before she stopped coming home. I got a few emails with attachments from Naberius. No subject line, no body, just a signature. Regards, Naberius. I didn't open them. Whether the attachments were related to the comic or Sarah, it couldn't be good. I couldn't bring myself to delete them, though. I leaned against the bathroom counter, struggling to stand, and stared into the mirror at my own sunken yellow eyes. The flaky, ashen skin around them was so loose and heavy that the raw flesh beneath the sockets was visible, like I was a bloodhound. I traced the lazy contours of sagging flesh with my eyes and ran a frail hand over the bald, scabbing head. I was more like a decrepit 90 than a well-worn 35. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. Nothing was inside me. And that's when the shift happened. My face, what was left of my collapsing, rotten face, shifted into something even less human. Black fur sprouted across my cheeks, nose, and scalp. My nose extended, blending into my chin to become a snout. A pair of horns exploded from two sores on the top of my skull, curling back and around my ears. There's always more to regret, Naberius explained from the mirror. There is no rock bottom. Things can always get worse. Oh, we're going to have so much fun together, Martin. I blinked, and my face was back to the pale, sinking mask. I raged. I broke things. I sent a fist into the mirror, spiderwebbing it into a million reflections of me while swallowing the pain. With the same blood-soaked hand, I smashed Sarah's perfume bottle on the tile, ripping out drawers. I snapped in half everything I could. Then I took a knife-like piece of broken glass into the bedroom and shredded the pillows and the bedding. I let the darkness back in, screaming a solemn vow that this time it was mine to control. I would let the dark parts of me back in and keep them under my rule. And you know what? I got better. It's taken time to rebuild that darkness, but sure enough, my scalp's oozing scabs are healing. The wounds in my mouth sealed up and almost don't hurt anymore. I can stand on my own 2 feet. Sarah hasn't come back, though, and all I want to do is drink. But I remember my oath and use the scars on my hand as a reminder. I'm a lot of things, but weak isn't one of them. I found another job. It's not much, but it's enough. I'm also drawing my own comic. It's good, to work on something that matters to me, on something that's a part of me. I'll do some pages, but, I never have time to finish any real work. I worry about that a lot. I worry about time. I worry about how much time I have left before the next thing happens. I'm just waiting. It's going to happen soon. Today, while I was sketching a layout for a furniture magazine spread, something knocked at my window. Outside stood a crow. I wonder what else Naberius has in store for me. I wonder how much more of me he'll take. There's always more to regret. There is no rock bottom. Thank you for sharing my nightmares and helping me carry the grief. If you enjoyed the show, please share your favorite nightmare with a friend or family member. Don't forget to leave a rating. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you'd like to go the extra mile, you can join my Patreon for $3 a month and you can cancel at any time. Or you can buy my book on Amazon. I've put links to both in the description. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram, Facebook, or Threads. Just look for Nightmares and Grief and you'll find me. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Good night.